Welcome to Daily Buzz News. Our lead story today.
Anger is reportedly growing within the South African National Defense Force as senior generals accuse President Cyril Ramaphosa of protecting powerful drug cartels. These allegations have fueled serious concerns about rising instability within the country's defense establishment. According to sources close to the military, several senior officers now view General Mwanatsi as a symbolic figure who has inspired open dissent against the presidency. While no official action has been announced, tensions are said to be quietly escalating behind closed doors. Trouble is stirring beneath the surface of South Africa's defense structures. Whispers of mistrust, frustration, and political betrayal are spreading through the chain of command. Beneath the discipline and protocol that define military life, deeper wounds appear to be forming. These wounds are linked to years of budget cuts, alleged political interference, and growing suspicions that the highest office in the country may be entangled with criminal power networks. Defense insiders warn that the South African National Defense Force could be approaching a critical breaking point. Senior generals reportedly believe that President Cyril Ramaphosa has deliberately weakened the military to protect financial interests connected to individuals accused of corruption and organized crime. At the center of these suspicions are underworld-linked businessmen, including figures associated with the 2 billion rand hospital scandal that has already drawn the attention of investigators. To those within the military's upper ranks, the pattern appears too consistent to ignore. They argue that while wealth and influence flow into criminal networks, the Army, Navy, and Air Force, the defenders of South Africa's sovereignty, are being left to deteriorate. Vice Admiral Mozawa Lobi's chief of the Navy was among the first high-ranking officers to publicly question the motives behind the continued underfunding of the armed forces. Speaking at a Navy gala in November, Lobi's openly questioned whether those responsible for defense budgets were compromised by drug traffickers and human trafficking syndicates operating along South Africa's vast coastline. For him, it was no longer simply a matter of mismanagement. He described it as deliberate sabotage, citing the Navy's inability to patrol its own waters due to unserviceable ships and submarines. Lobi's warned that these financial constraints may be linked to the hidden influence of maritime crime syndicates.
About the future of your child or children. As Chief of the Navy, I am entrusted in providing mission-ready and capable Navy that must be able to patrol and keep our country's territorial waters safe. In order for my fellow South Africans to feel safe and enjoy the resources and wealth that is found in our oceans. Let me put it in a simple way, for ease of understanding for any ordinary South African. The point I want to bring across is that the South African Navy is not just a military force. It is a protector of our sovereignty, our maritime resources, and our citizens. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, the continuous absence of the Navy at sea is dangerous for our country and any maritime country for that matter. Today, as the country, we are battling the high pollution of illegal immigrants. Our society and the future of our kids is being destroyed by drugs, which gets into their hands through the seas. I invite you to read an article which was recently published on the Defense Web titled Opinion, Between Two Oceans and the South African Navy in Crisis, written by Nicholas Gotzel, a member of Parliament, who is a member of the Joint Standing Committee on Defense. In there, he makes mention that, and I quote, various stakeholders in society tend to see expenditure on defense as being detrimental to expenditure in an economic realm. Yet, a robust defense force is essential to protect sovereignty, secure 80% of trade through maritime routes, support domestic stability, and lead African peacekeeping missions. Ultimately, a strong and capable defense force remains a core component of ensuring internal and external stability and safeguarding the conditions for positive economic outcomes, close quote. for our cabinet to approve the reduction of the SANDF workforce or strength is actually nothing far from telling us to implement a defense version of what General Mkhwanazi has disclosed in the Madlanga Commission with regards to the closure of the political killing task team. Closing down the SANDF is like having a house without walls, effective CCTV systems, and reaction capability should thieves violate your space uninvited, or buying a car and not taking an insurance, or not having a life cover for yourself and family. Yesterday, I shared with those that attended the Prestige Ball that in the past week I was in Australia to attend the Indo-Pacific Sea Power Conference 2025. Whilst I was interacting with the chiefs of navies from different maritime countries at the conference, the chief of the Kenyan Navy mentioned that a week before coming to Australia, his Navy caught a ship from East Asia that was carrying a large consignment of drugs, which was destined for Mozambique. And you will agree with me that Mozambique was not the final destination, but maybe South Africa was. The Philippine chief also brought to my attention the fact that on continuous basis, they arrest ships carrying drugs whose destination is Southern Africa. So what I am stressing is that our prolonged absence at sea due to non-availability of serviceable ships and submarines, all because of under-resourcing of our Navy, should concern you as fellow South Africans. I often find myself questioning whether those responsible for making significant decisions, particularly regarding the funding of our defense force, if they may be directly or indirectly influenced by these drug cartels, illegal traders, maritime criminals, and human traffickers. Because it will appear that these consistent underfunding and incapacitating of the South African Navy and the Defence Force in general is to ensure the success of the operations that undermine our nation, compromise its sovereignty, and jeopardize the future of our children.
The Defense Minister Angie Motshekga responded swiftly, describing the Navy chief's comments as inappropriate and disingenuous. She insisted that any concerns raised by senior officers must be addressed strictly through official command channels. Her statements to Parliament were firm and procedural, but they did little to ease the growing unease within the defense community. To many senior generals, Motshekga's response appeared more focused on protecting political leadership than defending the institution under her authority. Although the minister stated that Vice Admiral Lobies was not formally reprimanded, she repeatedly stressed that operational concerns must never be aired publicly if they risk compromising national security. This emphasis on secrecy has only deepened suspicions among critics, who believe that uncomfortable truths may be hidden beneath the official narrative. Military sources say these internal warnings are now fueling a stronger sense of resentment, particularly as more officers begin to feel that loyalty to the chain of command is being exploited to shield corruption at the highest levels. Meanwhile, the Minister of State Security, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, publicly confirmed that her department has identified and is actively monitoring the risk of a coup. Speaking in July, Ntshavheni acknowledged that while there had been no recent attempt, the existence of such discussions within national security assessments was deeply concerning. For the first time in decades, South Africa's government openly acknowledged that the possibility of a military takeover was being taken seriously enough to warrant ongoing monitoring.
In the last few days or in the last few weeks, there's not been anyone attempting to do a coup in South Africa. We can say that not that they are not people planning. They are, but we're continuously monitoring them and making sure that we deal with those. It's for those reasons that we unveiled, and like I said earlier, when things are done, everybody else will claim the glory for the work that we have done. So we can't come and say, well, of course there are those who go with cameras and say we are arresting I almost went there. We are arresting these people for this and this. They don't tell you that is intelligence driven and it's from us. It's us who pass. We don't have the arresting power to make sure we stay proper and clean and uphold the constitutional principles of our country. So we then rely on the law enforcement agencies.
The growing unrest within the defense sector has now collided with a series of political and corruption scandals, further straining trust between the military and the presidency. President Cyril Ramaphosa, already under scrutiny for several financial controversies, has been accused by defense insiders of shielding corrupt relatives and political allies while ignoring the deteriorating condition of the armed forces. When anti-corruption investigators raided the luxury home of the president's nephew, they reportedly uncovered fleets of supercars and evidence of procurement fraud linked to health department contracts worth hundreds of millions of rand. Even as the Special Investigating Unit confirmed that the individual was a central figure in one of the Tembisa hospital corruption syndicates, the president's office maintained that there was insufficient evidence to expand the investigation to other provincial health contracts. Political analyst and Democratic Alliance Member of Parliament, Michelle Clark, said this hesitation revealed a troubling pattern, one in which institutions are weakened to protect the politically connected. The DA believes the alleged corruption extends beyond Gauteng, possibly into the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal, but the presidency declined to act without additional evidence. Defense officials argue that this decision strikes at the heart of the problem, a leadership accused of protecting allies while starving critical national institutions, including the South African National Defence Force, of resources. These revelations have coincided with a severe decline in the military's logistical and operational readiness. Reports indicate that only 27% of SANDF personnel are currently fit for deployment. The remainder are either medically unfit or have not completed mandatory health assessments required to determine combat readiness. Sources say commanders have often failed to enforce these assessments, citing chronic shortages within the South African Military Health Service. Senior officers have warned that illness rates are rising sharply, to the point where at least one disease category linked to immune system failure is now considered too sensitive to disclose publicly. The decline is not limited to personnel. Military bases across the country have become increasingly vulnerable, with decaying infrastructure and serious lapses in perimeter security. A detailed audit revealed that at the Doornkop Ammunition Depot, once protected by metal detectors, biometric access systems, and alarms, none of the security measures are currently operational. At the Janki and Wakkerstroom depots, conditions were described as outdated and dangerous. In Simonstown, fencing at naval facilities has rusted and partially collapsed. Despite these risks, large quantities of ammunition remain stored at these sites under minimal guard. The theft of a shipping container filled with ammunition from Blomsprut Air Force Base in August only intensified fears within the military. Among the stolen items were rounds recently returned from peacekeeping missions in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Despite a nationwide investigation, no arrests have been made, and much of the base's perimeter fencing remains damaged. The SANDF Logistics Division has yet to implement a centralized weapons tracking system. Instead, each branch, the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Military Health Services, continues to manage its own arsenals without unified oversight. At the same time, the Defense Force's financial outlook has grown increasingly dire. Analysts within National Treasury warn that the SANDF is expected to overshoot its personnel budget by 3.8 billion rand this financial year, nearly 700 million rand more than earlier projections. The strain has been worsened by the high cost of repatriating military equipment from foreign deployments and by the mid-year intake of thousands of new service volunteers, which added further unapproved expenditure. As soldiers face delayed salaries and shortages of basic supplies, suspicions have deepened among senior officers that defense funding is being deliberately constrained. For generals such as Vice Admiral Mozawa Lobis, the pattern appears deliberate. The government's reluctance to strengthen the defense budget, they argue, mirrors a willingness to protect business networks already linked to organized crime. If individuals accused of manipulating law enforcement and influencing ministerial decisions, as highlighted by the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, are able to operate with impunity, critics fear that state policy itself may be shaped from behind the scenes. General Rudzenai's controversial visit to Iran in August has also been interpreted as a symptom of this widening rift. Although the trip was reportedly authorized by Defense Minister Angie Matsheka, his public remarks criticizing colonial arrogance triggered strong reactions from Western governments and domestic critics, who accused him of straying beyond the bounds of military neutrality.
Get involved in supervising the general's travel. That process sits with the minister. So the president did not know. Is there concern? Yes, there is a concern. At this period of heightened geopolitical tensions, as well as conflict in the Middle East, one can say the visit was ill-advised, and more so the expectation is that the general should have been a lot more circumspect with the comments he makes, which delve into the area of foreign policy that only the president as well as the Department of International Relations are responsible for, and does not fall in the purview of the officers. We are in a process of managing a very delicate exercise.
The United States State Department has expressed concern that South Africa's relationship with Iran may involve military or nuclear cooperation. These claims were firmly rejected by President Cyril Ramaphosa's office. Despite the diplomatic fallout, no disciplinary action was taken against either the defense minister or senior military figures involved. For critics already suspicious of the presidency, this lack of accountability reinforced the belief that the president is unwilling to confront potentially compromised individuals within his inner circle. Military analysts, including Darren Olivier, now warn that the Defense Forces leadership structure is showing signs of strain. Olivier notes that the growing trend of senior officers publicly criticizing government decisions suggests a weakening of traditional military discipline. Historically, South Africa's armed forces have remained firmly under civilian control, even during controversial and costly deployments such as the Bongi mission in the Central African Republic. However, Olivier argues that a new generation of generals appears increasingly defiant, testing the limits of acceptable dissent. If left unaddressed, he warns, this defiance could escalate into direct political intervention, pushing South Africa into a dangerous and unpredictable period of instability. Political scientist Professor André Joubert offers a broader explanation. He argues that the current tension is not simply the result of military rebellion, but rather a symptom of systemic political failure. According to Joubert, when governance breaks down and corruption erodes institutions, it becomes almost inevitable that security forces begin to involve themselves in political affairs. He cautions that this is precisely the environment in which coups historically emerge. As December draws to a close, tensions between the military and political leadership have reached levels not seen since the early years of South Africa's democracy. Senior officers within the SANDF are reportedly growing restless, convinced that the president is not only neglecting the defense force, but doing so deliberately to protect criminal interests embedded within the state. Private discussions within military circles reveal deep dissatisfaction, with some generals accusing the president of enriching himself and his allies while allowing the country's security infrastructure to deteriorate. Many of these accusations trace back to evidence presented before the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, where the name Katlaho Matlala has repeatedly surfaced in investigations into organized crime and state corruption. According to testimony heard by the commission, Matlala is alleged to be a central figure in a powerful drug trafficking and organized crime network known among law enforcement officials as the so-called Big Five cartel. The group is believed to operate across multiple provinces and has allegedly infiltrated senior levels of government. The commission heard claims that the cartel exerted influence over police leadership, politicians, and procurement officials. Alleged connections between Matlala and former senior ministers highlighted the extent to which criminal networks may have become embedded within state institutions. Witnesses told investigators that funds were allegedly channeled into political campaigns within the ruling African National Congress. Others claimed that Matlala's private security company was awarded lucrative police contracts despite his long history of criminal allegations. Although many charges against him were later withdrawn, critics argue that the pattern points to systemic protection within law enforcement structures. The KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner, Lieutenant General Lamlam Kwanatsi, was among the first senior officials to publicly expose the alleged links between organized crime and high-ranking political figures. His decision to testify before the Madlanga Commission in mid-2025 sent shockwaves through both political and security circles. Kwanatsi described a network of cartels capable of manipulating investigations, obstructing prosecutions, and interfering with task teams probing politically motivated killings.
They include prosecutors in Gauteng province, the judiciary, and all these are controlled by the drug cartel as well as business people in that province of Gauteng.
His warning that these are individuals seeking to capture the state through organized crime has since become a rallying phrase within sections of the SANDF. To many soldiers, Lieutenant General Lamlam Kwanatsi now represents the kind of courage they believe is missing from their own leadership. The parallels between the police corruption scandal and the Defense Force's financial collapse have not gone unnoticed. Senior officers believe a similar pattern is emerging within the military, but with even more serious consequences. In this case, the outcome is not only corruption, but growing national vulnerability. Underfunded bases, neglected medical evaluations, abandoned equipment, and repeated ammunition thefts all point to what critics describe as a state of controlled decay. Each failure raises a troubling question. Who benefits from a weakened South African National Defense Force? That question gained renewed urgency as attention turned to Hangwanima, President Cyril Ramaphosa's nephew by marriage. Identified by the Special Investigating Unit as a key figure in the looting of Tembisa Hospital, Ma has been investigated for his alleged involvement in more than 40 fraudulent supplier contracts worth close to 1 billion rand. Despite these findings, the presidency has resisted expanding the SIU's mandate to probe Ma's other business interests in the Northwest and KwaZulu-Natal provinces. Critics argue that this reluctance reflects political favoritism, particularly after footage emerged showing the president visiting Ma's luxury residence in one of Johannesburg's most affluent suburbs.
Let's have a cameraman in the world. Let me tell you. Yes. So, I mean, if you say it's beautiful, this is the best.
Although Ramaphosa later downplayed these visits as chance encounters during his morning walks, neighbors have confirmed that such meetings appeared frequent and cordial. Political analysts like Zaki Landvu and Supposer have questioned Ramaphosa's claims of ignorance. They point out that, as a sitting head of state, he receives detailed intelligence briefings daily. For them, it is implausible that he was unaware of his nephew's ostentatious fortune or his role in major corruption scandals. The more the president attempts to distance himself from these acquaintances, the more the public begins to suspect that he may in fact be protecting them.
Contracts worth 381 million rand from Gauteng hospitals. And you write that it's not being felt by the majority of our citizens because BE only benefits ANC-connected cronies.
No, you keep saying my nephew. I don't even know this gentleman. And so let's not even get there.
Thanks for watching. What say you, my fellow South Africans?